So there has been some drama lately, man. Some blood in the water in the progressive community. You got very prominent voices sniping at each other, going back and forth. This is interesting. So we're going to go ahead and dive into it. The whole drama, how it relates to the 2020 campaign, and what are my thoughts, what are my opinions. Let's go ahead and dive into it, man. So Bernie had an interview with the Associated Press. This was immediately after he endorsed Joe Biden. That was a very controversial move by Bernie Sanders, to say the least. Brianna Joy Gray is his press secretary from the 2020 campaign, and she's been very vocal that she is not going to endorse Joe Biden. She wants to move him in a more progressive direction. She wants to use that leverage as a tool to move him in a more progressive direction. So Bernie was speaking about that his press secretary was being very vocal about that, and also just the whole principle that we are not going to be supporting Joe Biden. So this is him speaking about his supporters not supporting Joe Biden. He said, quote, "Do we be as active in electing Joe Biden and doing everything we can to move Joe and his campaign in a more progressive direction? Or do we choose to sit it out and allow the most dangerous president in modern American history to get reelected?" He continued, "I believe that it's irresponsible for anybody to say, well, I disagree with Joe Biden, and therefore I'm not going to be involved." He also said of Brianna Joy Gray, the woman who dedicated her life for an entire year to this man's election, the woman who took on talking heads across CNN, MSNBC, and all the corporate media on his behalf, dedicated her life to this campaign for an entire year. He said of her, he just dismissed her basically and said, "She is my former press secretary, no longer on the payroll." A lot of progressives took issue with those statements, calling us irresponsible for standing on our principles, and also denouncing his press secretary for having those principles. We took a lot of issue with that, and Kulinski took a special issue to that, and he responded on Twitter. By the way, if y'all don't know Kulinski, you're on Secular Talk, awesome channel, over nearly 1 million subscribers. Dude's been a prominent progressive voice in the community for years and years now. Helped co-found Justice Democrats, which created AOC. Kulinski's huge, okay? He responded on Twitter and said, "What's irresponsible was repeatedly telling reporters that Biden could beat Trump as working people across the country put their last $20 and what little hope they had left into your campaign. What's irresponsible is giving away your leverage for absolutely nothing concrete. He could have handed a list to Joe of 10 executive orders and said, all of these or I'll walk, but he didn't. Shrug emoji." All right. He continued on here from not me, us to not us, him. All right. Okay. Cal is 100% correct. He is. Bernie had major flaws with his campaign. He should have been more aggressive. He should have been absolutely more aggressive and more vehement. He should have called Joe Biden out for everything that was wrong with his corruption, that was wrong with his policies, for the corporate sellout that he is. He should have said it to his face. Instead, he was in interviews saying that Joe Biden can, of course, beat Trump. I will support the Democratic nominee regardless of who it is. That's what Bernie represented. Now, you can get mad at him for that, for wanting to stay above the fray and always focus on policy and not get into the dirt and sling the mud like they were doing to us. But that's pointless. Bernie is who he is. Like, people need to understand that. Bernie is who he is. He's a statesman. He's very principled. He's from the MLK era. In his eyes, you turn the other cheek. When they go low, you go high. That's what he represents. He's from that era, and you can get mad at him for that. You can denounce him for that. But you can't then act as if you've been in his camp all along, because that's the guy who you were supporting all along. The peaceful, nonviolent, above the fray, policy-oriented guy. That's who Bernie Sanders has been all along. So don't act as if he suddenly changed on you and become non-principled, because that's just false. The blame game is serving no one. Just understand that. And again, this is where I slightly disagree with Cal, so I'll revise that statement. I don't think he's 100% correct. There's no amount of bargaining or concession making that would have made Joe Biden more progressive. Like, I want people to understand that. There's no amount of holding up your support or your endorsement. There's no amount of any of that, because they're not going to move on anything concrete. They never will. Want to know why? Because they are sold out. They are sold out to their donors. They are beholden to their donors, not to working families. So anything concrete, like appointing progressives in the cabinet, like having a progressive VP, like denouncing corporate money, whatever, that goes against their interests, their corporate interests, and their own political interests. This is how they've operated in Washington for decades now. That's not going to change simply because you threaten to hold up an electoral win for them. They would rather lose this election than move on anything concrete. And that's a fact. That's a fact. They would rather lose this election than move on anything concrete. Because if they move in our direction, they give up their donors. They give up their interests. They're beholden to them. They can't move in our direction. Their hands are tied. And honestly, for many of them, I don't even think they want to. They would rather lose than move in our direction. So no, they don't want to win. They don't want to win. And it's abundantly clear at this point because instead of moving in our direction, instead of giving us something concrete, when we are begging them through social media, through activist groups, etc., to give us something concrete, they won't. In fact, Hillary made larger concessions in 2016 than Joe Biden is right now. Lowering the Medicare cap to 60, what is that? That's nothing. His climate plan still has a grade of F- from many large prominent climate groups. Joe Biden still is all talk. And what's amazing is that instead of moving in our direction, giving us something, throwing us some type of bone, something concrete, something that we can back up with something, a progressive cabinet position, VP position, whatever, they would rather lose than give us that. That's amazing. That's truly amazing. They are now making less concessions than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. That shows you how little they care about us turning out to vote. They would rather continue to throw us the middle finger and lose our trust than actually do anything concrete and win back our trust. Because again, they're beholden to the donors and not to progressive interests and working families. And look, dog, this is the main point. Turning your fire on Bernie Sanders, the guy who helped spark this movement, that's pointless. Bernie is who he is. Biden is who he is. The Democratic establishment, they are who they are. It's no amount of holding up your vote and saying, I won't endorse you. You better make a deal. Nothing is going to change that. Our focus now, where we direct our energy, has to be on uniting the left, organizing the left, and expanding the tent so that we become a political force to be reckoned with. Because the only way we're going to see real change in this political era, when you have Joe Biden and Donald Trump as your two presidential choices, the only way you're going to see real change is getting people in the streets. Millions of them. You have to protest. You have to strike. You have to utilize your voice with clear and concise demands and a whole organization and infrastructure behind you to make that possible. And you have to use that grassroots support and that mobilization to get primary candidates out so that we can get these establishment Democrats out of office. That has to be the focus now. It's time to turn the Twitter rage into real legitimate action, real legitimate organization, real legitimate mobilization. People are angry, they are scared, and they are confused because now their options are Donald Trump and Joe Biden. There are going to be lots of people sitting out this election. So use that apathy and that anger for something real, something that can create real change. Otherwise, what are we doing? We're just talking. We're just sitting here talking with no real action. And that's pointless. Look, man, you got to take the protests and the general strikes and you have to use real grassroots activism. That's going to be the tool to create real change, especially in this era, because we have no friends when it comes to the people in power. And once you do that, once you have people out in the streets holding the economic system hostage, holding the political system hostage, that's the leverage. That's the real leverage. Not, oh, I'm going to withhold my vote. That does nothing. It's not leverage. They don't care. Because you're not their donor. You're not funding their campaign. You're not the operative that they've been focusing on and depending on for 40 years. Joe Biden doesn't care about you if you don't vote for him. They don't really care if they lose this election. They care about their donors. But once that money stops going away, once you hold their economy hostage, once you hold the political system hostage with millions of people out in the streets, millions of people protesting and using their voice for change, that gets their attention. That's the leverage. That's ultimately the main point of all of this, man. Bernie's campaign is over, all right? And we have to realize that we're not going to create change just through the presidency or just through the ballot box. Stop focusing your fire on it and blaming each other. It does nothing. So shut up and let's get something real done. Let's organize. Let's fight. Let's get people out in the streets using the only power we have left, our voice. Once we use that power that we have, that collective power of our voice and our message, nothing can stop us.
Riding, yeah, you know we vibing. Bitch, we just live.